What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Rats Report. It's time to talk about the Toronto Raptors. It has been far too long, but we're going to be looking at the Raptors' strategy approaching the NBA draft. I'm going to be going through a list of factors that may impact who and which player the Toronto Raptors will draft. So if you're ready to watch this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you wish to hit the subscribe button as well, that'd be very much appreciated. So let's get this video started. So let's talk about team needs. The Toronto Raptors clearly had a lot of team needs. They went through a weird season of where they thought they were going to try and compete and kind of had this let's see what happens approach. It clearly didn't work out, and the Raptors decided to go in a completely different direction, trading a bunch of their players. They had a lot of injuries as well and tried to tank. It didn't work out. But let's take a look at some of the Raptors' weaknesses from last season. And the Raptors had a ton of them. Their three-point shooting was atrocious. They ranked 27th in the NBA, shooting only 34.7% per game. And this is just absolutely insane because they acquired Kelly Olynyk, who could shoot threes. They also had Grady Dick, who just really caught fire the second half of the season. And so did Gary Trent Jr. As well, who was just shooting the three-point ball at a really good rate the second half of the season. But despite all of that, the Raptors are still not a great three-point shooting team. And excuse me, I did forget to mention Immanuel Quickley as well. He was absolutely amazing for the Raptors from the three-point line as well. But despite all of that, the Raptors' weaknesses is quite obvious, and they're still not a team that can shoot the three-point ball really well. Points per game, despite having Scottie Barnes, despite getting RJ Barrett, who did a phenomenal job with the Raptors when he came over. Immanuel Quickley did a tremendous job. They ranked 21st in the NBA, averaging only 112.4 points per game. Their free throw percentage wasn't great, 29th in the NBA, 75.6% from the free throw line. We've seen during the regular season and even in the playoffs, those few crucial points are so important, and the Raptors clearly are leaving a lot of them by missing their free throws. They're not a great rebounding team. They did lose a lot of size and pressures. Pascal and OG as well. They ranked 23rd in the NBA, averaging only 42.7 rebounds a game. They were turning the ball over quite a bit. 20th in the NBA, 14 turnovers per game, and points allowed per game. They were 25th in the NBA. Their defense was not good at all, especially after Jakob Poeltl went down. They were giving up 118.8 points per game, and you absolutely cannot do that if you hope to be a playoff team. So obviously the Raptors have a lot of weaknesses. Let's talk about some of the other factors as well, which can contribute to who they'll draft. So keeping those weaknesses in mind, do the Raptors look to trade up in the draft? Now, this is a very tricky situation because most people will say, well, let's just package the 19th and 31st pick and trade up to the 14th or 15th spot. It doesn't always work like how we assume it to, or just how because it works in NBA 2K. That is not how general managers think, guys. You'd be surprised. It seems easy. Doesn't always work out that way. Also, considering that the Raptors did have a potential top 6 protected pick, and we know it belongs to the San Antonio Spurs. It is now the 8th pick. So the Raptors are in a very interesting position. Do they now look to trade Bruce Brown more than ever before in hopes of maybe now acquiring another first-round pick? Because there's a few strategies you can use here. If you do acquire even a mid-20s pick, let's say, for Bruce Brown and some salary back, do you now look to package 19th and whatever, let's say the 24th pick to move up in the NBA draft? Do you have a team out there that's desperate enough to give you a higher pick, maybe at the 17th, 18th spot, 16th spot, that would want Bruce Brown in return, right? So those are some of the questions, but the more realistic strategy here is if the Raptors were to trade the 19th and 31st pick, and maybe let's assume move up 5 spots, So the Raptors, there's one tricky factor taking into consideration. Sure, most fans will tell you that better players are available as you move up into the draft, but that isn't always necessarily the case. And the Raptors are more pressured now to really hit on that one pick if they do trade up in the NBA draft, whereas opposed to where you have the 19th pick and the 31st. So if you hit on one or the other, now all of a sudden it doesn't seem too bad. And it also gives the Raptors more options, right? When you take a look at how many weaknesses they have when it comes to their team overall, they can potentially pick that up in the 31st pick as well. Not saying that player is going to be an all-star, not saying that player is going to be an exceptional player, but they can always find good role players at the 31st pick in the NBA draft as well. So we'll see what happens with the Raptors. We'll see how teams will be willing to operate on draft night, if that is a possibility for the Raptors to move up in the draft. So let's see what happens. Let's talk about the next factor here. Now, this one is always the most trickiest, most potential or best player available. Now, I'm going to use 2 players here, Dalton Knecht, and let's use Tajon Salon. We know Tajon Salon is a player that has a lot of potential, but there's no guarantees in the NBA. Now, of course, the likelihood that either one of these players, forget both of these players, falls into the 19th, or even if the Raptors move up 3, 4 spots, is still available there, is very likely not going to happen, right? So, but just giving you guys an example here between the two players, we know Dalton is likely to be someone that can come into the NBA, contribute right away, but you know what his ceiling might be. Whereas Tajon Salon might be a player that isn't going to be impacting the team wins, isn't going to be contributing a ton right away, but you know the potential is absolutely insane. Now, obviously, taking into consideration the Raptors' past draft picks, you look at someone like a Grady Dick. They really surprised everyone when they took a three-point shooter because that wasn't their norm of what they were used to doing. They drafted Scotty Barnes, who, you know, he obviously surprised everyone, but he was supposed to be a very, I wouldn't want to say a very little project, but he was supposed to be someone that had a lot of potential, but no one expected him to have the rookie season. They expected him to be a good player, but he just turned out to be a spectacular player. And then you look at players like Delano Banton as well, right? Selected late in the second round. Not a lot of people expected a ton from him. The Raptors clearly saw the vision, and we see what's happening with the Portland Trailblazers. They're giving him minutes, they're giving him touches, and he's putting up really solid numbers. So that is going to be the question, right? Though that's always a tricky situation. Do you want someone that can contribute right away, or would you rather wait a season or two and you have the patience to possibly develop this guy, but the ceiling is much higher, right? So that's always the question. Do you draft someone with a higher floor right now, but the ceiling may be lower, or do you potentially draft someone whose floor at the moment is a lot lower, but their ceiling is a lot higher? So that will be interesting to see the type of approach the Raptors will make. Let's move on to our next factor here. Now, this one's always tricky. Positional need. The Raptors, you could honestly argue they have a positional need at every single position, and most likely any player they'll draft will be coming off of the bench. But does it complicate things? Let's use an example. Let's say if the Raptors draft, not that this player, again, not that he would fall there, but Reed Sheppard. I know some people have said he can play the guard position, but if the Raptors were to re-sign Gary Trent Jr., you draft Reed Sheppard, then you have Grady Dick, who isn't, although he's really tall, he's not a small forward. He's more slated to be a shooting guard. Does that overlap, some of the skill sets? Again, the Raptors need three-point shooting, so don't get me wrong. But does it overlap certain positions, right? So then it becomes a little bit complicated. So in terms of positional need, one thing, Raptors assistant general manager, who does a tremendous job in scouting, Dan Tolzman has always stated is you have to draft regardless of positional need, because he's always stated that you never know when trades happen. You can potentially lose a lot of players in a certain position. So you should never draft positional need, or you should never draft a player just because you have a position filled, right? That is something he has constantly stated, and he's right. When you look at the Raptors last offseason, every fan base would have told you they're a long, lengthy team. They've got Pascal, they got OG, they got Scotty Barnes, they got Precious Achiuwa, they had Jakob Poeltl as well, so they had their center there. They still have Jakob, but now you look at the team, OG's gone, Pascal's gone, Precious is gone as well. So they clearly need in the forward and power forward position as well. So it becomes a little bit complicated, but do not be surprised if the Raptors do draft someone, regardless of wherever he may be playing. Even if it's a position we already have filled, do not be surprised if the Raptors do that, because they have done that in the past with Scotty Barnes when we already had Pascal Siakam. So it shouldn't surprise me one bit if they do draft someone where it might confuse fans a little bit, because they don't necessarily need that player because they already have that position filled. But let's see what happens with the Raptors. Let's talk about some of the other things which could really, really cause a major impact on who they draft. Now, shout out to someone on Twitter. I'm sorry, I saw this months ago, but one thing they stated was when you look at the Raptors and who they'll draft, take into consideration who are some of the players they are signing throughout the season, whether it's 10-day contracts, whether it's two-way guys. So taking a look at the list here, this doesn't give us a clear idea of who they will draft. They did sign Jonte Porter, Malik Williams. We know they signed at the end of the season. Center. Jonte was more of a power forward. Kobe Simpson, Jamias Ramsey was a point guard / shooting guard. We know we acquired obviously Kelly Olynyk and re-signed him, but Muhammadu Gay, Marquise Noel was waived. DJ Carton, so Javon Freeman Liberty. So does this give you an idea? I mean, just my personal opinion on what I see with the Raptors. It looks like, I know Malik Williams isn't a stretch big, but it really seems like they're wanting a center that can really stretch the floor. I know people are going to say, well, you have Kelly Olynyk, you have Jakob Poeltl. Why do you need a center? As good as Kelly Olynyk is, he's a stretch power forward. He's not a good rim protector. And the Raptors, in case of injuries as well, they still need a center. And one thing with centers is they do take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to fully fully developed. So even though we have Jakob Pertl, he's still, what, 29 years old. So he's not going to be around forever. He's probably got another 3, 4 good seasons left. So in the meantime, what you can do is draft a center, develop him under Jakob Pertl, and then slowly as he progresses, maybe you can transition him into the starting position as well. But even some of the other guards as well, what I've really noticed with the Raptors is based on some of the skill sets of players like Jamias Ramsey, excuse me, seems like the Raptors are really, really targeting guards that can play defense. And from what few games I did see DJ Carton play as well, it seemed like he was trying his hardest to be a really good defender, and he was. He did a great job as well. So it gives you an idea. Do the Raptors potentially look to draft a center, or maybe another stretch big? And it could be, do not be surprised if the Raptors potentially look to draft a really good defensive guard as well. So these are some of the things that I think could really impact the draft when it comes to some of the players that could be available and certain aspects of what to look for in a potential draft pick. Now, just to end the video off really quick here, guys, I also wanted to talk about free agency as well, because the Raptors could have some money to spend depending on what they do with Bruce Brown. We know Gary Trent Jr. is a free agent as well. But I quickly wanted to take, a look at some of the free agent draft class or free agent class here, because does free agency also impact who the Raptors will draft? Take into consideration if the Raptors have a plan A, B, and C to draft, or to sign a point guard in free agency, does it make sense for the Raptors to draft a backup point guard? I don't know. Like, you look at the free agency class for point guards here. Kyle Lowry, Lonzo Ball's already accepted. I believe D'Angelo Russell's also accepted his player option. So those two are off the list. Markelle Fultz. Tyus Jones, a lot of people are saying would be great, but a lot of people have stated he doesn't want to be a backup point guard, especially on a rebuilding, retooling team like the Raptors, right? Is Monte Morris a realistic option? We know we had Kira Lewis. Guys like Russell Westbrook and Pat Bev are definitely not coming here. So how does that impact the Raptors? Like, when you look at the Raptors, if they have a player, I think the question you have to ask yourself is if they have a plan B or plan A option, plan A doesn't work, plan B, plan C, and D. And let's say the plan A and B don't work. How good are the plan C and D players that you have on your list of potential guys you can sign in free agency, right? So again, just going through a list of some of the shooting guards, Paul George, Klay Thompson, James Harden, Buddy Hield, very unlikely to come here. We wouldn't sign Evan Fournier because he can create his shot a little bit, but he's not a good defensive player. And you've got someone similar in Gary Trent Jr. as well there. So KCP, he's going to want a winning team at this stage of his career. So again, there aren't great options in free agency for those, point guards, shooting guards as well, small forwards. Gordon Hayward, DeMar, OG. I mean, who knows? Maybe OG comes back, right? But not realistic when you think about it, just with the money wise. Again, it's not a ton of great players. Patrick Williams would be nice, but he's a restricted free agent, meaning the Bulls can match any option. And taking a look at the power forward position, you got LeBron James, Tobias Harris, Pascal Siakam. Very unlikely any of those players, especially those top two players, come to the Raptors. Pascal definitely is not going to come to the Raptors. I'd be, never say never, but very unrealistic that happens. And then again, it really drops off after that, right? Like Jalen Smith, the Raptors could have potentially gotten in the Pascal trade. They decided not to. Obi Toppin as well. Kyle Anderson would be nice, but he's not someone that can shoot the 3-point ball really well. He's a good defender. He can pass. So again, you've got to ask yourself, and even in the center position here, Jonas Valanciunas, they trade him because he can't play defense, and they need a defensive center behind Jakob Pertl. They're not going to sign him, although he can stretch the floor. Richaun Holmes is an undersized big. He's 30 years old. I don't see them signing him. Nick Claxton could be interesting, but he doesn't exactly fill the need of what the Raptors need. They need 3-point shooting from their big man. They need defense, which he does provide, but he's not a good shooter at all. Not from the free throw line, not from the field anywhere. I shouldn't say anywhere. He's pretty good at the rim, but he can't really shoot outside of maybe 5-10 feet, right? Similarly with Isaiah Hartenstein, he's someone I actually wanted many years ago. For some reason, the Raptors decided not to pursue him. He's very likely to re-sign with the Knicks. He's doing well there. And then the drop-off, again, it's so bad, guys. Like Kevin Love, you're not signing him at this stage. Mason Plumlee, Daniel Theis, Andre Drummond. What are we doing here? You've got a question. So I think taking those factors into consideration, that the Raptors are very unlikely to target with any position in free agency a top guy, right? The top 3 options in any free agency. I think the Raptors have to really emphasize on what they need. Do they look for a center, small forward, a point guard, and what type of players are they looking for? Are they looking for a point guard that can facilitate? Or are they looking for a small forward that can only play defense and hit some threes occasionally? Are they looking for a center who I think they absolutely should be a rim protector? And, if they're able to get a stretch big, Kelala Ware would be amazing for just to name drop a few, out there. But it would be very fascinating. Let's see what the Raptors do, guys. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts. I'm sorry if this video is running a little bit long. I just wanted to give you my thoughts and look at some of the factors that could really impact who the Raptors could look to draft. Do you think some of these factors will come into play when the Raptors do draft? Could they go in a really completely different option like they did with Grady Dick? Not a lot of people had expected them to take Grady Dick. He's a three-point shooter, not a tremendous defender. So let's see what happens. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave your comments down in the comment section below, and that will be it for today's video. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.